Dear students, let us begin with the second part of the lesson on India and the USSR during the Cold War, in which we will learn about the Indo-Soviet Treaty of 1971. Indo-Soviet Treaty of 1971. The present Bangladesh was a province of Pakistan and was called East Pakistan until 1971. The elections for Pakistan's National Assembly resulted in an absolute majority of the Awami League headed by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. The leadership in West Pakistan did not want to allow Mujibur to become the Prime Minister. The session of the National Assembly was postponed and Mujibur was arrested and detained in West Pakistan jail. A revolt broke out in East Pakistan as a reaction to this, and hundreds of people were killed in the atrocities committed on the people. Millions of people fled their homeland and took refuge in India, which naturally affected the economy of the country. Pakistan decided to wage a war on India based on its false claims that India was responsible for the unrest in East Pakistan. Pakistan had the support of the United States and of China to wage a war against India. India helped the Mukti Bahini, which fought against the West Pakistani in December 1971. The Pakistani troops had to surrender unconditionally to the Indian Army on 16th December 1971. This was not practically possible without the help of the Soviet Union. When Pakistan was preparing for a war with the moral and military support of both the US and China, India had no option but to take allegiance with its friend, the USSR. On 9th August 1971, a treaty of peace, friendship and cooperation was signed between India and the USSR. The treaty provided for mutual respect towards each other's policies and work for peace in the world. The countries had mutual agreement on periodic consultations, and they pledged to refrain from entering in any sort of alliance against each other. It was decided that reciprocal consultations were to be made if either one of the countries was subjected to external aggression. The treaty was signed for a period of 20 years and it acted as a deterrent so that neither the US nor China intervened on behalf of Pakistan. The major provisions of the treaty were as follows: mutual respect for each other's independence, sovereignty and territorial integrity, and not to interfere in others' internal affairs. They declared their determination to continue their efforts in order to ensure peace in Asia and throughout the world. They also called for general and complete disarmament, both nuclear and conventional. They condemned all sorts of colonialism and racism and reaffirmed their determination to eliminate those social evils. Both parties affirmed their respect towards the peace-loving policy of the USSR and the policy of non-alignment. They pledged to maintain regular contact with each other whenever an international problem arises. They would expand economic, scientific and technological cooperation as well as trade, transport and communication. They had strong ties between them in the fields of science, literature, education, public health, radio, press, television, cinema, tourism and sports. The countries declared that they would refrain from entering into or participating any kind of military alliance directed against each other. Both countries undertook not to provide any assistance to any third party engaged in an armed conflict with the other country. They shall enter into mutual consultations to take appropriate measures to ensure peace and security in case of an attack or a threat of attack. Not to enter into any secret or public understanding with a state or a group of states that could lead to military damage to the other country. The duration of the treaty was to be 20 years. extendable for successive periods of 5 years. Termination of the treaty can be initiated by either of the countries with a notice period of 1 year to the other party. Any difference of interpretation would be settled through bilateral means in the spirit of mutual respect and understanding. The treaty was signed between Soviet Prime Minister Gromyko and Swaran Singh of India. The treaty was renewed in 1991 for another 20 years, but with the disintegration of the USSR in late 1991, the treaty became void. Even though the treaty was considered a milestone for both countries, critics argued that the treaty contradicted India's traditional policy of non-alignment, as it seemed to align India more closely with the Soviet Union. However, India's leadership viewed it as a pragmatic step to safeguard national interests during a crisis. But this is the best India could do in order to prevent possible US intervention in the Indo-Pak issue. The political leaders across parties praised the treaty, but there was a fear that with the help of this treaty, the USSR might try to interfere in India's domestic affairs. The main arguments of the critics of the treaty within the country were: the treaty violated India's policy of non-alignment, India was turned into a sphere of influence for the USSR, the treaty could be seen as a military alliance, and that is a complete violation of the basic principles of non-alignment. The treaty created a new obstacle in the Indo-China relations. Indo-US relations would be worse than before. The Indian Ocean was likely to be an area of strategic conflict between the superpowers. India was fully supported by the Soviet Union both inside and outside the Security Council. Both countries cooperated on the question of admission of Bangladesh into the United Nations. Further, an important agreement of scientific and technological cooperation was concluded between them on 2nd October 1972. President Brezhnev paid a 5-day visit to New Delhi in 1973, and security and freedom of the Asian countries was the major agenda of the visit. All the existing projects in India were expanded both in the agricultural and industrial sectors. With the help of the Soviet, India conducted its first nuclear test at Pokhran, Rajasthan. While Pakistan and China criticized India for this test, Soviets supported India as it was not aimed at the production of nuclear weapons, but for the development of nuclear power. I hope you understood about the Indo-Soviet Treaty of 1971. We will discuss about Indo-Soviet relations during Janata government India's stand on the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan and bilateral relations during Mikhail Gorbachev regime in the next video. Thank you.